Here's the good news. I got some good news for you. The good news is what Kirby Smart wants Georgia to get better at, they're really good at it already. And they've proven in the past they can be absolutely elite, arguably the best in college football history. Here's the bad news. The bad news is Kirby Smart wants to get a lot better at defense. And the bad news might be for the teams Georgia's playing. When you look at this past season, Georgia was a top 5 defense in terms of scoring defense. They were the only program in the country that was number 5, top 5 in scoring offense and scoring defense. They were the only one. You know who the other ones were? Here, I'll read them for you. Scoring offense, LSU, number 1. Oregon, number 2. SC, number 3. Oklahoma, number 4. All those guys, if I'm not mistaken, their quarterbacks are gone. Okay? Scoring defense. Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State, Iowa, all those teams in the Big Ten, none of them facing explosive offenses like Ole Miss, Missouri, well, I wouldn't say Alabama, but, the usual grouping of SEC schools. That's not what happens in the Big Ten. I don't know what offense is in the Big Ten, but it's something like watching glue dry. It's terrible. So, Georgia was top 5 in both, which means to me, just in a very simplistic way, they were the best team in the country and won the national championship. I mean, that's what a lot of this is right now for Kirby. Is there's a couple of different ways to look at that, and let me put that to the side for a second. But they were the best team in the country. They didn't win the national championship. The statistics are pretty obvious as far as all this is concerned. Michigan was a really good team too. UW, Oregon, these were good teams. I mean, Florida State. It's hard to really make the justification that they were one of the best teams. They were one of the best teams in the country. Should they win the national championship? No. But, Georgia, in terms of third down conversions, they were number 1 on offense, 55%, and number 1 on defense, 26%, 25.7. So they were doing everything right. They just lost the wrong game. I mean, if they lose to Tennessee but beat Alabama, they couldn't have lost to Missouri. If they lose to Tennessee, if they lose to Auburn, if they lose to, whoever, they didn't have a lot of close games. So if they lose those games, it doesn't matter. They win the conference championship and they move on. So they just lost the wrong game. And that's really the first time in a long time that Kirby's lost the wrong game. It's actually the first time since the 2020 season when they lost to the Gators that they lost the so-called wrong game. Not the so-called, it was the wrong game. But he wants them to get better. Here's what he said. I don't know if I've read this to you yet or not. This is what the whole video is about. He says, we've got to play better defensively than we did. We were number 1 in the country on third down. And what he means by that is what I just said. They were number 1 on offense and defense on third down. They were the best team in the country on third down, period, last year. I'll have to go back and look to see when the last time that happened was. But he said, but we didn't create enough turnovers. We didn't stop the run well enough. Then offensively, we had to do the same thing. I don't know, just be straight. I don't know how much there is to complain about offensively. I thought Georgia was really good. They surged as the season went on in terms of scoring. The Florida State game is relatively obvious what they did to Tennessee, what they did to Ole Miss, I guess the Florida game too. But they really did score a lot. Now, at the end of the season, in terms of points allowed, well, they just allowed 3 points too many to Alabama, or 4, however you want to put it. So there's a million ways to dice this up and slice it up and say whatever you want. Georgia has been the best team in college football each season the last 3 years. And in that time, they've won 2 national championships. Here's one of them. And this team had a defense that was unstoppable. You can ask DJ Uiagalelei. This is a DAWGSTRUCTION signed by Kelee, Ringo. I've got a few of these left. Take advantage while you can. They powered their way to the national championship on the back of that defense. The offense was pretty good too, but it was about the defense that season. This year, they were really a very balanced team. But in terms of where they were in 21 versus where they are today, yes, the defense has regressed in terms of just straight up points allowed. That can change though. Now, you're returning a lot of guys. You're returning a lot of guys. But it's not like so you have the opportunity to really, stop people in their tracks. But y'all, there were this many teams that scored more than 20 points on Georgia. Alabama, Georgia Tech, Missouri, and UAB. Everybody else scored 20 points or fewer. When you're only allowing in 14 games, you're only allowing 4 teams to score more than 20 points on you, you're going to win a lot of football games. Missouri scored 21. Alabama scored 27. Tech scored 23. And then Mizzou and UAB scored 21. And, so I bet if you were to go back and look backwards and say to Kirby, hey, listen, you're not going to allow more than 27 points to anybody the entire season, I bet he would immediately take that. I bet he would immediately take that as a total and absolute win. I mean, in 21, Alabama scored 41, and I believe that's the only team that scored more than 18 on Georgia. And the other team scoring 18 was Alabama. That was it. Everybody else scored 17 or fewer. So that was a bizarre situation where, Bryce Young played unbelievable. In 22, obviously the Ohio State game notwithstanding, you had the Kent State game where they scored 22. Missouri scored 22. LSU scored 30. People were freaking out. And, of course, the game with Ohio State where they scored 41. The Gators scored 20, but I'm not going to mention, if you don't score 3 touchdowns, there's nothing to talk about. So, can this program get better defensively? They can. He's right about the run game. I mean, he's almost certainly always right about a lot of this stuff, if not all of it. But they didn't quite stop people the way that they would have wanted to. Missouri, Alabama, both those games, it's not like those teams ran all over Georgia. No, that's not what it was. They ran enough on Georgia, and that's how they lost to the Gators in 20. So, and frankly, that's how they lost to Alabama in 21. So this is really about how functional are you when you need to be. How can you stop the run when you absolutely have to? Because in the third quarter, and when you're up 24, and you're in the third quarter, and you're playing, Vanderbilt, and your second and third string guys are in there. I'm not saying it doesn't matter if they run on you. I'm saying that's development time. You need to be functional when you need to be functional. When it's 2nd and 8, that's probably a passing down most times, but it doesn't need to turn into 3rd and 2 because of a draw or a run or some sort of quarterback deal where they're running around. In every sport, it doesn't always seem like it, but in every sport, every moment matters. In football, the problem with football is you don't know which play or plays are going to determine the game. That's why every single one of them is so important. In blowouts, no. But when Georgia and Alabama are playing, you got Georgia Clemson coming up. Traditionally, Georgia Florida, Georgia Auburn. Those are games where every moment really does matter. And if you are ready for that moment, every single moment, then you don't have much to worry about. But Alabama, in the past with Nick, has always been able to fight Georgia tooth and nail pretty much every down, okay? Georgia, the same with them. There's been a few exceptions. I mean, in 2020, in the fourth quarter, Alabama was just the better team. That's all there is to it. But all those other games, 18, 17, 21 national championship, 23 SEC championship, Alabama won all those games. Every single one of those games the games came down to the last play of the game. So that's the problem, is you don't know when you got to do it, but you got to do it. And if he's saying, hey, we got to get better defensively, I can assure you that he's going to move to do that this fall.